Right, I'm gonna talk about white people's Christianity for a moment. And I received an email today. I'm gonna speak about the email in a moment. I'm gonna just read a little bit of it and then also use that. But with Christianity, a lot of black Christians, we have the mindset of the turn the other cheek. We have the mindset of don't repay the evil for evil, and those are Christian concepts, but they're not concepts that work when you're speaking against racism. They're not when you talk about turn the other cheek, for example, you're talking about a reaction, man. He's talking like in a have a mindset where you don't naturally go and you're reacting and repaying evil. Don't internalize somebody's evil. Don't let somebody be bitter and hate you and then now you're bitter and you hate them. But you do return evil or injustice with justice. You do, if somebody is unjust to you, you do reconcile that. You do make something right. There's still action that has to be taken. It's not a matter of turn the other cheek when someone is going to harm you, your family, your children. It's not a matter of don't repay evil for evil. That doesn't mean that you don't have to get violent at times. That doesn't mean that you don't have to go to war at times. That doesn't mean you don't have to fight sometimes. It's just don't internalize that same evil from them. Fight them back. If someone's fighting you, fight them back to bring justice to the situation, to diffuse the situation. You don't fight them back. Oh, well, you wanted me and my family dead. Well, I want you and your family dead. You don't have to be in that type of way. Someone can want you dead, and as long as they know they're not going to touch you, y'all can both coexist in the same community. But when it comes to Christianity, a lot of us, we were taught Christianity in a way to be very passive. Remember when they started teaching the slaves Christianity, it was because the slaves hadn't internalized white Christianity yet. So they were still fighting a lot. It was still a lot of fighting because they were still holding on to their African religions. They were still circulating those African religions, reformulating them, and using those. So as long as you have your own religion, you're not going to be conquered by people. As long as you have your own understanding of God, you're not going to be conquered by anybody because you know who your God is and you're willing to die with that God. And so when they actually start teaching the slaves Christianity, the purpose is to keep them passive. The purpose is literally so that those rebellions stop. And what ends up happening, they teach them Christianity, and you still get things like Nat Turner happening, where he's reading the Bible and he's learning to read. He's learning to read the Bible. He's preaching to people, and then he's like, you know what? Forget all this. Like he's seeing this stuff. He's reading what's in the Bible, and he's like, this isn't matching up. We're gonna have to make some things happen. Um, you know, a Christian isn't really something that you are in this world. So the Bible talks about being in the world but not of the world. A, you're not a Christian in this world. The Christian is just it's kind of like an ideal. A Christian's not you don't go to God on judgment day and say I'm a Christian. Christians were named that. They were named that in Acts. And they were named that because people were just trying to figure out like, hey, what do we call them? We call well they say that they follow someone named Christ. Let's call them Christians. But before that, the unit, the church, they saw themselves as like a mobile moving force. They just saw themselves as hey, this group over here needs help. They need money. They need assistance. Let's help them. Hey, we need to send this person over here to spread the good news. Get people in that community going. They saw themselves as a unit, as a moving force unit, um, not as I'm a Christian. Hey, I'm a Christian. Hey, I'm a Christian. They saw themselves as disciples, followers, trying to be like Christ, trying to follow his teachings, understand what he was saying, and follow him to the best of their ability. I got an email today, and a lot of you guys remember about a year ago, I did a video and I spoke about a university I used to go to, Harding University, out there in Searcy, Arkansas. All the way out there in Searcy, Arkansas. And Harding University, I was speaking about one of the presidents, George Benson. He was a racist, a vocal racist, an open racist. He did sermons about how blacks should not be entering into the school, how there shouldn't be segregation into the schools, and there was a petition going out to basically change the name of one of the buildings at the school. George Benson, he's gone. He's dead now. but he was the president there for like 20 plus years. I think like 25 plus years. And during that time, that's the time of integration, the 50s, the 60s. I think he's even in there to the 70s. And he was openly against the segregation. He was openly racist. And his name is on the auditorium, this George Benson Auditorium at Harding University, where I used to go to school. A lot of this stuff doesn't matter to me anymore. I don't go to the school. I don't have to be on campus anymore or anything like that. But basically, I want to read this email just showing you guys how white Christianity works and how we can't accept everything that comes from Christianity just because it's Christian. So there was a petition that went around basically to the students, to alumni, and basically saying, "Hey, let's change the name of this auditorium." In case you don't know, Harding University, the George Benson Auditorium is where they go in for worship. It's where they go in for chapel. I think at the school you are required to go to chapel 5 days a week. So 5 days a week you're required to go to chapel to worship God. And George Benson's name is right at the front of the chapel, and it's named after him. So there was a petition going around to change the name. The request was, hey, let's change the name to Botham Jean. A lot of people know I started this YouTube channel because my brother Botham Jean was murdered out there in Dallas. And he was also a student at Harding University. He led the worship there a lot. He was one of the best worship leaders they've ever had at Harding University, probably the best. All the students requested him. If there was a lectureship or a gospel conference, everybody was requesting him to be there. If he was singing somewhere on a Sunday night, students would go just to hear him sing. They forget about the preacher. They would just go to hear Botham sing. And so the request was, let's change the name from George Benson Auditorium to Botham Jean's Auditorium. And I signed the petition, sent it to a lot of people. I think the last time I checked, it was like 15,000 signatures signed. The school only has like, I think the school has maybe 4,000, 5,000 students. So it's bigger than just the students on campus on the school. But let me just tell you what the president sent out an email. Bruce McCarley, I know Bruce McCarley. I've had a lot of times speaking with him and meetings with him while I was out there on the campus. So I know him. And he responded back this. And Harding University is that's one of the top Church of Christ higher education learning. There's Pepperdine, there's Abilene Christian, there's Harding University. Those three are the top Church of Christ school. So this is a reflection on Church of Christ. This is a reflection on Christianity, and Black Christians are going to have to deal with this. Black Christians are going to have to deal with this aspect of Christianity and whether or not they're going to accept this aspect of Christianity. So he responds, he says, in a recent weeks, there has been a petition that has circulated online insisting that the name of Harding's second president, Dr. George Benson, be removed from the auditorium that bears his name. As you can probably imagine, I have heard from a multitude of people on both sides of this matter. You don't need to listen to both sides of the matter. If one side's right, one side's wrong. From both within and outside the Harding community who have passionate opinions about what we should do. George Benson was a vocal racist and supporter of segregation. My first impression was that the divide among these opinions was because of age. A large majority of those who are in favor of removing the name are current or recent students, while a large majority of those who favor keeping the Benson name on the building are above the age of 50. However, as I have listened more and more, I've come to believe that the primary distinction in this matter is whether it's a whole bunch of nonsense. He's just going through talking a whole bunch of stuff. But I'm gonna skip on because I knew the email was gonna be something funny when I saw how long it was. I said whenever you got to get something done, it doesn't take a long email like that. So he continues on. As I consider the question of renaming the Benson Auditorium, I have wrestled with how the Christian message of sin, redemption, guilt, and grace, judgment, and forgiveness fit into all of this. It is important as we wrestle with the difficult issues of our time that we not forget weightier matters like justice, mercy, and faithfulness. He's just talking a whole bunch of stuff. He's not talking nothing. I have reflected a great deal on Hebrews 11, the presentation of faith's Hall of Fame. I've wondered how many Bible heroes we would have left if we labeled everyone according to their worst moment. So don't judge everybody according to their worst moment. Their greatest sin or their most embarrassing weakness. In Hebrews 11, there would be no Abraham, there would be no Noah, there would be no Moses, there would be no Rahab, there would be no one to learn from and no one to inspire us. We would lose all respect for overcomers because we would have had no respect for those who had anything in their past to overcome. The issue with this is George Benson wasn't an overcomer like Abraham, David, Moses, Rahab the prostitute. He wasn't an overcomer. He went to his grave being racist. We don't know the extent of his racism. When you talk about not 25 years as a president of a university, a top university in a denomination in America, a white male who is a vocal racist, we don't know how many lynchings he attended. We don't know how many lynchings he participated in. We don't know how many people he's hurt and harmed that he wasn't just out in the open. If this is him in the open saying, I'm vocal about my stance in this way, I'm vocal about my stance on black people and about the evils of who they are apart from us and our Christianity. If that's what he's saying in the open, we don't know the danger of this man. And for this man's name to be on the front of the place where you worship God is is white people's Christianity. That's white people's Christianity. White people's Christianity is a different God than what I serve, than who I serve. Okay, so when you look at that form of Christianity and say, hey, we know he was this way against, they're basically saying like this was like a wrong he did, like he made a mistake. He didn't segregate the school till they threatened to stop the federal funding. He even after the law, so now he's not even a law abiding citizen. They tried to make it seem in the email like he was, like segregation started, in 63 and all this type of stuff. It was the money. So Bruce McCarty, he goes on in the email and says, with all this in my heart and mind, these are the conclusions and decisions I have reached on the matter. He says, the name of George Benson will remain on on the auditorium that now bears his name. Rather than remove his name, the university needs to tell the more complete story of Dr. Benson, both the high points and the low points, the inspiring and the painful, his childhood in Oklahoma, his graduation in Harding, his mission work in China, his establishment of the Canton Bible School, his 29 years, his 29-year tenure as Harding's second president. His 30 years this man was the president of the school. There's no telling how dangerous this man was. His landmark testimony before he's still going on about all this man's accomplishments. His landmark testimony before the Congress of the United States in the 1940s. His resistance to integration in the 1950s. His integration of Harding in 1963. His fundraising for numerous Christian colleges, his work in Zambia at the George Benson Teachers College. So they're like going through all his list of accomplishments, saying like, we're just gonna now tell the full story, but we'll leave his name up there. We'll leave his name up there where we go and worship our God, even though this man lived a life of believing people were inferior. We'll leave his name up there where we are about to go worship God, although we know this man believed that a group of people were inferior. A group of people who now we go and recruit them. A group of people who now we go and they make us money on football, make us money on basketball. Botham Jean, Botham Jean was like the school's, I mean, he was their worship poster child because, like, hey, anytime there was something big at Harding, get Botham to sing. Botham gonna get everybody in. Botham gonna take it up. Black people, the president's against it. The former president's against it, and his name is at the front of the building. And you want to ask African Americans to come in there and worship God with you? I don't worship the same God as you. This man didn't want me at the school. Bruce McCartney could have made a. This was a wonderful opportunity. I knew they weren't going to change the name based off the petition. They will change the name. Eventually, the name will change. Eventually, the name will have to change. They're a little behind in the times of realizing what's happening globally. Right now, there's a no tolerance for racism because of how much damage is caused in the world globally. There's no tolerance for it. So this man being a racist, it's not going to be allowed for long. But he's basically saying, we're going to just tell the good of the man and the bad of the man. We're See, when it comes to white Christianity, they can cover up their wrongs. I remember going to a church, a white church one time, and the preacher was up there and he was giving these examples of all these people who grew up in the church and fell away from the church. And I'm noticing all the people he was talking about were like black people. He's talking about Whitney Houston and Casey and JoJo. And I mean, people who basically grew up in church and then they didn't, you know what I'm saying, they didn't stick to the gospel music. And then when he used an example of someone who didn't grow up in church but gave his life to Christ, he used a white person. This is an all white church. I'm like, why were all the examples black? Why are you throwing the black people under the bus? And there's a lot of reasons for that. I'm not gonna get into all of it right now, but I'm just saying in their psychology and their mindset, they can justify their wrongdoing to just, hey, it was wrong, it wasn't that bad, but they're not gonna change their wrongdoing unless forced to. They're not going to change their wrongdoing. There's not going to reconcile the wrong. There's no reconciliation in this email about, hey, we know he was wrong. He for years stood against the black population. Not only that, when the black population was allowed in the school, the first year they were allowed in, the students got kicked out. Most of them got kicked out for protesting because they didn't like the treatment on the campus. So it's not like it was a smooth process. You have the main president against it. He's against it. Then they let the students in. All the students, everyone know he's against it. If your president's against it, how you expect the students are going to be treated. So he's basically saying like we're gonna tell more of the complete story. Well, when you tell more of the complete story, why is his name on the front of the worship building? So we recognize the major, and notice how he said most of the people who wanted the name to stay on there were over 50. Did you catch that part of the email? I noticed a major divide that most of the people who wanted the name changed were current and recent students. And a large majority of those who want to keep the building are above the age of 50. So you're saying that the future is against this. The future, the youth, the current students, the older students, they are against this. And yet still, he doesn't explain the reason why he won't change the name. He doesn't explain that. He doesn't explain the reason why he won't change the name. He explains the reason why this man should still be honored. This man lived his life believing and acting in a manner that treated a whole group of people inferior. Even going as far to say it was God's will for it to be that way. So this man's he's not even preaching Christianity in no type of way, not even no gospel in that. There's no type of honor in that. Let me go on to just read the rest of the email. Some of the other stuff he says. Today we are embarrassed that African Americans were not welcomed as students at Harding until 1963. They weren't welcome there. They weren't welcome there in 1963. I confess to I confess to now being embarrassed that even though African Americans have been an important part of the Harding University community since 1963. There are no buildings or landmarks that celebrate any of those alumni who have made such a contribution to our university family. That must change. I am today pronouncing the organization of a task force that will include African American board members, employees, alumni, and students who will address the challenge of identifying the most meaningful and appropriate things. Blah, blah, blah. So basically, we're going to now name some buildings after African Americans. This is what they did in slavery. Slaves get mad, just throw them something. They don't have anything, so just give them something. They're mad now. Give them some shoes now. They don't have shoes. Give them some shoes. They don't have. Give them a day off. They don't have anything. Give them a little bit extra good food from the big house. Dude, this is saying like, okay, we know he was racist. We know he was openly racist. just from what we know, just from what we've seen, just from what we're being called out on. And Harding University, they're responding to the petition. They didn't bring this up. They didn't bring this up on their own. They weren't going to. They weren't going to do anything for the African American community. They haven't. They're only doing it because of the pressure. And what they're doing isn't even what the request is. The request is, hey, just take the name off the building. The request is not put names on another building. The request isn't get more blacks in the school. The request was just take that name off the building where we're about to go worship God. We're about to go worship God, and we got to see this man's name, who we know. But the real problem with white people's Christianity is the racism is so tied into it. The racism is so tied into it. It's not tied into ours. We get it from a different perspective of passiveness, but their Christianity allows for it. You guys remember when Elijah talks about, hey, y'all have your God, I have mine, and we're gonna see whose God is the real God, by whose God brings fire down. You see whose God is the real God, whose God brings justice down. In the light of all of this, Derek Chauvin and everything happening, a lot of people don't know. George Floyd, Christian, identified as Christian. You can talk about, oh, well, I saw him in this video, or I saw him this, identified as a Christian man, plenty of times vocally speaking about his love for God, his love for church. His church community vouches for him. Botham Jean was a Christian. Those 9 people who got killed in that prayer meeting, they were Christians. Christianity is not going to save you from. See, you're in the world, not of the world, but when you're in the world, you're black. The Christian thing is just the ideal. The black is the real. That's your group. That's who God made you. That's who God made you in this world. The Christian thing is that's your eternal ideal. Christians were named that. Before that, they were believers. They were believers in God, and they were moving in that way. They were moving in a way that was going to honor God and reflect God, reflect Christ to the best of their ability. So he says that, basically he just gives an old slave trick where I'm gonna name some buildings after some African Americans. They're probably gonna do something like, I don't know. They're probably gonna do something like give Botham Jean a building or a room. It's gonna be real nice or something. They're gonna that's gonna be the thing. Botham Jean, first of all, when you're even talking about when you're talking about segregation African Americans, Botham Jean and his family, they're not a part of that segregation movement. They're not a part of that foundational African American, Black Americans. They're not a part of those descendants of slaves in the USA during that time of segregation. That he was over here as a benefit, as a blessing from the civil rights movement and from what segregation did. That's why him being from St. Lucia, he was able to come over here was because of the struggle of Black people. And not that that's not that that's not a defining factor. He's still our brother. But I'm just saying, they're kind of intertwining two struggles, two different things happening. So they acknowledge all this type of stuff. He says, then the name won't be changed. And I'm gonna wrap it up now. I'm talking too much and all this type of stuff. I do not want to approach this matter as an either or situation. Botham will be honored in his own unique way on campus. So Botham's going to be honored, who was murdered by somebody who thought a lot like George Benson. So how are you going to honor the man? Amber Geiger, she sides a lot more with George Benson. They had the same views. Amber Geiger had white supremacist hand signals. She was in those racist text messages back and forth with other police officers and friends. Her view of black people was as inferior than her. Same way as George Benson. And this is who Bruce McCartney sides with. And Bruce McCartney could have done the right thing. He could have just taken the name off and been cool. He could have said, hey, we're going to tell the full history. We're going to take the name off because we don't want that to be the right. We're not going to honor that. We're not going to honor that. We know he did a lot for the university, but we can't honor that anymore. He could have done that, but he chose not to. Now Bruce McCartney's name will go down with George Benson's name. Because see, 40 years from now, when people look back on this the same way they look back at Benson, they're going to look at him and be like, oh, he defended the name. Because see, people are going to look at Benson even worse 40 years from now. They're going to see this. Now Bruce McCartney's name is going to be tied right in. We're all part of a continued struggle, and he chose to just uphold that, and he never explained the reason why he wouldn't change the name. In closing, I want Harding University to be a place where racism is always as identified as evil. How is it? How is Harding University, Christian University, Church of Christ University, going to be a place where racism is always identified as evil if the name on the building where you worship is a man who was racist? How is racism going to be identified as evil? You had an opportunity to identify racism as evil by saying this man was racist, that's evil, we're going to take him off of the building. You had an opportunity to do that, but don't play the word games and play the whole long email and the whole long letters and trying to give us names and stuff like that for statues to Botham Jean, and then talk about, I want this to be a community where racism is identified as evil. That man was racist, and you're honoring him continually. The students are coming to you saying, we not comfortable with that. We don't want that. We don't want to see that name where you make us go 5 days a week to go worship God. We don't want to see his name. We don't want to be honoring him every time. How do black students feel walking in there? Of course, they don't care, but how do black students feel walking in there? I knew it at the time I was at Harding. I learned it. I learned it while I was at Harding. I was like, what? That's his name? What? But, looking back on it now and looking at the history of it, it's like, wow, we just are part of a continued struggle. So we're all people of all races are confident that they are valued. How are they going to feel confident that they are valued when this person who was openly racist stood from that same pulpit openly, on that same campus openly, speaking against a group of students who you now want to be there, you now want to perform for you on the athletic field. You still want to get a few good black preachers that you can send out and say, hey, they from Harding University. As I said, I really don't care about the name too much change. I knew it wasn't going to change based off the petition. It should change. They had an opportunity to make it change. Bruce McCartney, while it was on your shift, while you were the president, he just became the president like maybe 6, 7 years ago. This was the start. You're still in your starting years in your tenure, and you could have made a big stance right here. But the pressure and racism is a web. It's a tough web to get out of if you in it. If you founded your civilization, your community, your values on it, it's a tough web to get out of because you got to give up everything. It's all intertwined. So stay strong, black people, black Christians. Y'all have to identify. This is white Christians. This is the leading white Christian university, one of the leading church of Christ in the South. Abilene Christian and Harding University. Those are the two for Church of Christ. And I know a lot of people who listen to me on here are Church of Christ, identify as Church of Christ. You have got to identify the truth from the false. You have to identify what Christianity really is. Like, Christianity is not this accepting racism from people, accepting open racism from people. Um, Christianity is the work that is within you. It's the power. The gospel is the power of the work that is already at work within you. It's that work coming to being. It's that work coming out. There's a power that's already at work within you. All right, so y'all be blessed. Y'all be good. This whole situation, y'all talk to people about everything that's going on in the world. Keep it positive, um, because you have to be able to talk to people about stuff going on. Don't hold on to it. You'll get bitter. Don't return the evil for evil. Don't just see all this evil happening and internalize the evil. You're gonna have to be active. You're gonna have to be focused. That starts with you. It starts with your family. It starts with your friends. Don't talk about changing the whole world. Just deal with your family, your friends, your community. Right there in your community. Most of us on a day-to-day basis, we're dealing with the same people. We're going in the same habits. The same few people that we'll hang out with, we'll kick it with, we'll party with. We got the same couple people we'll go work out with, the same couple people we'll go hit up for this or that. With those people, just work with those people. Work with those people that are in your community, in your habit. Be defensive, be self-defensive mindset, and continue to seek God out and seek God in this is to bring justice right now at this time in the world. All right, y'all, be blessed, and I'll be back on here soon. All right.